I had a thought over the last few weeks about some fallout from the Rugby World Cup. And one of the main things I think to think about is who's going to be Ireland's fly half of the future. I think during the World Cup, Johnny Sexton came back from being injured and from being banned and played incredibly well. But I think it's no secret that he is now no longer the Irish fly half. And this is a massive loss for them. And I can't state how amazed I was about his performance with the World Cup with the amount of time that he had off. And we've always got to mention the career that he's had. He's probably one of, if not the best Irish player that's ever been. And his leaving really leaves a hole within that Irish team. The rest of the team around Johnny Sexton and whoever else will fill in at fly half is sensational. I mean, it's a world-class squad with or without him. And they really put in some big victories, even with Sexton out. I'm thinking specifically of the Six Nations before the World Cup. And I just had a thought, who's the guy that's going to come in and replace Johnny? There's a few options that we know of at the moment. And I'm just going to have a talk through who is within the Irish squad. In terms of the Rugby World Cup team, there were two other fly halves that were in there. Ross Byrne is obviously a big name to mention. He's the guy who's coming in and replaced Johnny Sexton when he was either banned or he was injured. And he came in and he's a caretaker. I think he's a great caretaker and he's done a good job. He's 28. I think he does the job of a really solid fly half. And I think at club level, Ross Byrne is a great fill-in. I think Leinster with Ross can win a lot of games, can win championships. He can win the European Championship as well. But I just have doubts about Ross Byrne being the fly half of the future. Now, the reason I have this is because I don't know what Ross Byrne offers compared to other fly halves in the world that really sets himself apart. His goal kicking's good. He's good at taking the ball to the line, but not excellent. Defensively, I don't think he offers anything special. So I just don't know whether this is the right person to kind of hand over the keys to. You got to remember that with Johnny Sexton, we've had, for Ireland now, two fly halves in a row that were absolutely sensational and generational talents. Before Johnny, it was obviously Ronan O'Gara, who was obviously on the smaller side, but really was kind of the pinnacle of fly halves in terms of putting yourself in the right territorial places of the pitch, knowing when to attack, and really setting up the rest of his team for success. I'm not sure Ross Byrne has that same game manager ability that Ronan O'Gara did before Johnny Sexton arrived on the scene. So I don't know if Ireland should really be entrusting their future to Ross Byrne at fly half. It's hard to say, considering that, I'm not Ross Byrne, and if you are Ross Byrne, you probably think you've waited your time in the wings and now's your time to start. And he could do. I mean, this could be Andy Farrell now deciding, okay, Ross is waiting in the wings. He's done a great job when Johnny's been out. This is the time where we run with Ross. But I think you've got to factor age into this a little bit. Ross Byrne's now 28. The next World Cup, he's going to be 32. I think a lot of Ross Byrne's game is dictated by his pace. Granted, that didn't affect Johnny. A lot of Johnny Sexton's game was based on his pace as well and being able to attack the line. So I don't know if you really want to be entrusting Ross Byrne to be performing at the next World Cup at 32 years old. I don't know if it's out of the realm of possibility for him still to be a very high performer at that age. Maybe I'm overthinking it. And maybe this is a perfect opportunity to give him 4 years to get accustomed to that 10 shirt and really own it. It would be interesting to see if he steps up to the plate, considering he's the man now. He's the main guy. He's not the caretaker. He's not the fill-in option. But for me, I think there's another option, another two options worth considering. Just to mention someone else who's in the squad, there's Kieran Crowley. Forgive me, I've never heard of this player before, but apparently he's in the squad and he's a Leinster player. And I think it's going to be really interesting now with me watching a bit more URC, seeing if he is still the fly half for Leinster. I believe he is. I'm just going to have a look at this. So yeah, looking up Kieran here, he is 25 years old. He plays for Leinster, so he's going to now be kind of the Ross Byrne of Leinster, which I think is going to be fascinating to see how he plays, see his ability. I mean, we're not expecting anything from him straight away. Those of you that are devout URC fans and devout Leinster fans, let me know in the comments if this guy's talented, if he's got a future, if he's got a lot of potential. I'd be very interested in that. The other option that I think is more immediate, that I think probably has a higher ceiling but a lower floor at the same time, is Jack Crowley. Now, Jack Crowley plays for Munster. I've seen him play this year. He obviously won the URC Championship with Munster last year as well. I think he's been really, really good, and I've liked what I've seen from him. However, he is 23. There are still parts of his game that I think require work. He's a bit more of a raw talent. Yes, he's won the URC, and I think you've got to have a fly half that's playing a pretty perfect game to win a championship. I did manage to watch the Stormers Munster game last year, although I was in a pub in Galway, so I wasn't exactly doing high-level analysis. Not that my analysis is high-level. I wasn't sat there with my notebook taking notes, but he looked good. And from what I'm seeing when he's on the pitch, he looks great. If you watch my last video that I was talking about, the Munster Stormers game that I watched last weekend, I think a key thing really is that he does need help in the form of specifically like a direct runner at inside centre. At the moment, he's got that at Ireland if he was playing. He has Bundyaki, he has Robbie Henshaw as well. Granted, both of these players are now sort of aging on, so I don't know if these players are always going to be available for Jack Crowley to have his safety valve. You would hope kind of as he ages, may not need that as much. Maybe this is the perfect time to put him more within the Irish lineup and trust that he's going to be the guy to take Ireland forward. And then you would hope that maybe there's someone in 2 or 3 years' time that can come in and fill in those 12s and 13 shirts. Not 13, Gary Ringrose is obviously still there. But fill in that 12 shirt and have someone that can kind of be a safety valve for Jack, who seems like he's a slightly smaller fly half. And yeah, I don't know. It's kind of, right now you have the choice between those two players, really, between Jack Crowley and Ross Byrne. And I think the advantages and disadvantages of picking either of those right now, you could make an argument for either of them. And I'm really excited to see what Andy Farrell does for the Six Nations. Of course, I don't want it for me to not mention him as a player. There is also Paddy Jackson. Those of you that are rugby fans, we all know the controversy around Paddy Jackson. And his history. Obviously, he was never convicted of anything. It's difficult to make a comment on this because you don't want to tell a team that may have some more knowledge than you, or they might have just made a decision that they don't want a certain player within their squad. It's difficult to talk about that aspect, so I don't want to get into that, and I don't want to make a judgment on it. I have looked a little bit into it in terms of like the WhatsApp messages and everything, and I've got my own opinion on it. I'm not going to make a comment on that. That's not my place to do that. I'm going to talk about pure like rugby ability. And for me, if we're going purely off of that and we're leaving all the other stuff to the side, Paddy Jackson's season last year with London Irish, I think is really, really of note. I think he played fantastically. I think he was, if you take Johnny Sexton out of the equation, I think he was the best Irish 10 that was playing at the time. His ability is unquestionable. He now plays for Lyon in the top 14. I haven't watched much top 14 this year. He is 31 years old though, so at the same time, if you're looking at Paddy Jackson to be a future, there's even more of a question of whether he's going to be a future for the next World Cup. 4 years from now, 35 years old. I don't know, you probably better be going with Ross Byrne anyway, even though I think maybe the ceiling for Ross Byrne, just ability-wise, that's just bear in mind that's all we're talking about, is probably less than what Paddy Jackson's are. So a really interesting conundrum for Andy Farrell and the Irish coaching staff about what they're going to be doing at this Six Nations. And I'm going to be fascinated at what they're going to be doing at fly half. I think the worst possible thing they can do is constantly experiment. I think they've got to go into the Six Nations with a decision of who they want at fly half. Maybe go through the practice training sessions. Who's performing better within training, go with somebody. But I would like for them to see them stick with one fly half for at least 3 games in a row, just to allow someone else to kind of step into the shirt that Johnny has occupied for so long. It just gives someone the opportunity to have solid starts without thinking that they're a second away from being replaced. That's what I would really like to see. I think the other thing to mention with being the Ireland fly half as well is that you're not just stepping into a shirt that Johnny Sexton's filled. The way I look at Ireland is that being the fly half for Ireland is it's like trying to step into a fighter jet for the first time and being given the keys for them. You have got an incredible piece of equipment around you. The fighter jet being the rest of the Ireland team. I think like the pack is incredible. The backs, once they're unleashed, they are just unstoppable. You've got this incredible piece of technology around you in the form of a plane that's also that's also a team. Difficult analogy to get my head around, but hopefully you're with me on this. And I think this is why this is a topic of conversation for me, really, and why I wanted to make a video on this. This isn't England, for example, where, yeah, great, you got world-class players in there, but you're really looking for a Jenga piece here that's really going to mesh the forwards, the quality that you have in both the forwards and the backs in a way that is going to, you know, work really well. I think the only real tangible equivalents are France and New Zealand, where there's a lot of controversy who comes in at the fly half shirt. And if someone's not performing at fly half, you know, then they're not up to that 8 or 9 out of 10 performance that you want that's linking the two together. As a fan, or even just someone who's watching as a neutral, you feel like you're shortchanged because you've got not got someone who's really unleashing the potential of the team. And we've seen in the World Cup what the team can do with Johnny Sexton at the helm at that 10 shirt. And, you know, there's a lot of pressure on whoever steps in that 10 shirt. I think there's more pressure than someone who steps in for England, for Wales, because, you know, you're the one who's flying this fighter jet. You've got to know all the buttons and everything. You've got to know how it maneuvers, because everyone can see it's a real high quality piece of equipment. It's a high quality product, and people are going to know if it's not producing what it's able to do. So there's a lot of pressure on whoever steps into the 10 shirt, really. And yeah, as I said, Andy Farrell and the Irish coaching staff have got a huge job ahead of them in terms of selecting and bringing up the next fly half. If you had to ask me personally what I would like to see in the next Six Nations in terms of a fly half choice, I think it's going to really come down to a lot what happens within the URC. I think for me, the options really, it's either going to be Jack Crowley or it's going to be Ross Byrne. I'd be interested to see what Kieran does as well. But I don't think he's really in the conversation for that starting 10 shirt yet, unless something happens to Ross and then Kieran is the starter and he really impresses. For me right now, I don't know. I think Ross Byrne's probably earned it. He's earned the position there. He's got great wins under his belt as the Island fly half. Maybe he's the guy to take him forward. Yeah, I think that's probably who I would go for at this current stage. But there's a lot of rugby to play from now up until the Six Nations. And I'm really interested to see how both these fly halves, both Jack Crowley and also Ross Byrne, perform. So I think it's very interesting to see their domestic campaigns and how they kind of build up to the World Cup and who's going to take on that 10 shirt. But that's it for me. Love for you to join in the conversation. Love for you to tell me what you think. Maybe there is, because I've only just kind of started watching the URC regularly, maybe there's a fly half I've missed. Someone you want to talk about, someone you're like, yo, Rugby Illuminati, talk about this guy, look at this guy. Please let me know your suggestions and I'll have a look at them. But that's my perspective on what's going on with the Irish 10 shirt and who to look out for.